Hey guys, it's Joe from American Trucks, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at the K&N Series 77 high flow performance cold air intake fitting all 14 to 18 5.3 liter Sierra 1500s. Now this is going to be a great option for you if you're looking for a name brand cold air intake that simply does it all. This thing is budget friendly, it's going to improve engine performance and engine bay looks. So what do we have going on here with the Series 77? We're going to start with what this thing is made out of, and that is 4-inch mandrel bent aluminum tubing. Now this thing is going to be great for looks. As you can tell in the engine compartment, this thing looks right at home. It's a huge improvement over factory, but those mandrel bends are also going to help promote a nice smooth airflow, which is exactly what you want in your throttle body. Now this one also features a nice open element filter. Down here you see we have that black powder coated heat shield that's going to keep our filter away from any warm air in the engine bay, give it a nice cool spot to suck up any air that it needs. We all know cooler air is denser with oxygen, more oxygen in through our throttle body. You can match that with more gas, and that is basically where the horsepower is going to come from. Now that's not going to be great for just performance and looks, but that filter is also washable, so it's going to allow you easy access. If it does get dirty, you can pull it right out, clean it off, put it right back in, you're all set. Not only that, but that thing has a service interval of about 100,000 miles if you're doing nothing but highway driving. However, if you are doing some off-roading, you'll probably have to clean it a little bit more often than that. Now next up, let's talk about what kind of horsepower numbers you could expect out of a cold air intake like this one. This is what everyone wants to hear. However, this isn't going to be a computer tune required cold air intake, and because of that, we're only looking at around 10 horsepower at 5,000 RPM. That's what K&N claims. However, I'm willing to bet that if you pair this cold air intake with a tune, you can expect at least that, probably even a little bit more. Now, that's really not a bad amount of gains to get out of a straight up no tune bolt-on cold air intake. 10 horsepower, again, that's right where you'd expect it to be. This intake is also CARB certified for the 2014 model year, so if you live in a state that is a little bit more restrictive, you have a 2014 truck, this should pass. However, you might want to check with your local authorities if you own a 15, 16, 17, or 18 and you live in a restrictive state. Now pricing for this one is going to drop in right around 300 bucks. Now that is really not a bad price to pay. Like I said earlier, this is a really good return on investment. If you're looking to pick up some cheap horsepower, there's pretty much nothing better in this price range than a cold air intake like this one. It's even backed by K&N's million-mile warranty. Now, if that still is a little bit too high of a price tag for you, take a look at the K&N Series 63. That basically trades this aluminum tube right here for a plastic one. That'll save you around 50 bucks. The install for this is going to be really easy. We're definitely looking at a 1 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter. No cutting, no modifications, no drilling to get this installed exactly how you see it right here. If you come with the right tools, I think this will take you about an hour or two in the driveway at most. So without any further ado, let me show you what tools you'll need and how it's done. Tools required for this install will include an impact, extensions, wire cutters, 10, 8, and 5.5 millimeter sockets, 3 and 4 millimeter Allen keys, a T15 Torx bit, ratchets, flathead screwdriver, and a 19 millimeter wrench. So the uninstall for the factory airbox, it's going to be really simple and straightforward, exactly what you'd expect. We're going to loosen up a few hose clamps, we're going to disconnect some electronics, and also we're going to disconnect some breather hoses, and this thing should pull right out. You're only going to need a couple of sockets and a few minutes to get this airbox out. First things first, we're going to disconnect our mass airflow sensor, and to do that, just pull up on the red tab and then press in, and that should pop right off, and then we can put that to the side. After that, we can come in with our 8 millimeter socket and a small extension. We're just going to loosen up that hose clamp that holds the intake tube to the airbox. And we can pull those apart as well. Now with those two things disconnected, we're going to get the airbox out. Now the wiring for the MAF sensor is held on with a Christmas tree clip right here. We're just going to pull up on that to disconnect it, and then we can work our way out. So next up, we're going to turn our attention to the intake tube. We're going to start with these breather hoses. We're going to disconnect those at the engine side. And to do that, we're just going to push up from the back. You see that gray clip there? That's the release. I'm just going to use a flathead to pry up a little bit. and that should pop right off. We're gonna do the same thing for the other side. The other side is gonna be a little bit easier. This one you push straight in and pull up, and that should pop right off. 8mm socket, we're gonna loosen up that clamp around the throttle body. And then with that loose, we're just gonna pull this big box right off. And that should come right off the truck. Now we're gonna head over to the table. We're gonna do a little bit of prep work on our K&N. Starting with the airbox portion here, what we're gonna be doing is installing this weather stripping all the way along this top edge here. And then we're gonna trim it with some wire cutters. You can see right there why the wire cutters are necessary. There's some metal bits in this weather stripping that actually clamp this down to the airbox. Next thing we're gonna install is this adapter for our new filter. This has some threads on the back here. That's just gonna sit on the side of the airbox like so, and tighten down with the bolts included in the kit. They're button head bolts. 4mm Allen key you're gonna use to tighten that down. You're also gonna use the flat washers and lock washers to do so. I have my Allen key on a ratchet just to speed things up a little bit. So that's gonna be it for the airbox. Next up, we're gonna take care of our intake tube. Obviously, we're gonna start by installing these couplers. We're gonna use the clamps in the kit as well as bring back our 8mm socket to get those started. So we're gonna start with this one. This one has the smooth wall all the way around. This is gonna be toward our throttle body, which is gonna be right after this bend. That's gonna sit on there right like that. And then we could use our socket to tighten down the intake tube side. The airbox side is gonna be the same process, except you wanna use this coupler with that small extension in the middle. Next, we're going to install these barb fittings. There's one on either side of the intake tube. These are effectively gonna replace our breather hoses once we get our brand new hoses installed. To tighten those down, we're gonna be using a 19mm wrench. You don't wanna go too tight on those. They're only plastic threads, but once you have them installed, we can come in with our new hoses like so. And I'm just gonna install those onto the barbs. We can secure those with the smaller clamps included in the kit. They tighten down with a 5.5mm socket. And we're gonna do the same thing for the other side as well. Now the last little bit of prep work we're gonna have to do for our intake tube involves transferring over the mass airflow sensor. That's gonna loosen up with the T15 Torx bit, and we're gonna install that to our new intake tube with some 3mm Allen key bolts. That's just gonna drop into our new intake tube right like that. Then we're just gonna install that with the new hardware. One thing to make sure of before you drop this mass airflow sensor in is that the seal on the bottom actually came with you. You can see that recessed portion in the intake tube is specific for the factory seal. So at this point, we're set to drop our K&N onto our new Sierra. We have the airbox built, we have the intake tube built. I put the two together as well as the filter on just so we can put it next to our factory intake and point out some key differences between the two before we take this thing back to our truck. Now, the first and most obvious difference here is gonna be in the looks department. This looks basically factory, right? We have that closed box filter, we have that paper filter inside, this flexible tube here that makes installing it a little bit easier at the factory. This big resonator box here, this is pretty much exactly what you'd expect right off the assembly line, and frankly, it looks ugly in the engine bay. That's not gonna be a problem on our new K&N. We have this big open element box here with that big conical filter, a lot of surface area on there. That's gonna move a lot of air, especially when comparing that to our factory paper filter, very restrictive in that closed box, not gonna allow for the most airflow. This is going to allow for a lot of airflow, but this heat shield right here is gonna keep that away from the warm air in the engine bay. Moving right along, we do have our aluminum intake tube here. Not only is that gonna be an upgrade in looks over this flexible tube, but something like this, it causes a lot of turbulence in the incoming air. That mandrel bent aluminum tube with the nice smooth walls in there, that's gonna promote nice clean airflow going into your Sierra, which is exactly what you want. Lastly, we're dishing this big factory resonator box right here. All this is intended to do is to take away some induction noise, but it also is going to add turbulence in the incoming air. Without that, we have that smooth bend, again, mandrel bent. That's gonna promote nice clean airflow. You're gonna hear a little bit more intake noise out of your 5.3 as well. So with all that out of the way, we're ready to head back to our truck. I'm gonna break down our new K&N into the three pieces: intake tube, heat shield, and filter. We're gonna start by installing this heat shield. However, we do have a little bit of prep work we have to take care of on our Sierra before we do so. So back to the truck, we're gonna remove this tray right here. Our old airbox sits on top of this. It's held in with 4 10mm bolts. Hold on to those bolts once you remove them, because we are gonna be reusing those. And we can pull that tray out and completely remove it so we can replace it with our heat shield. Then we're just gonna bolt it down to where that mounting tray bolted down. Now we're only gonna be using 3 out of the 4 of the original bolts to do that. There are 2 on the side here, and then there's 1 inside the heat shield. Now that that's done, we could drop in our filter as well as the largest clamp in the kit. And we're just gonna get that started on the adapter, and then we're gonna tighten it down with an 8mm socket. Now we already did all the prep work for our intake tube, so that's gonna be pretty easy. We're just gonna get that started on the back of the adapter. And then we're just gonna push that in a little bit and get it started on our throttle body as well. Now that we have this in place, we're just gonna continue with the 8mm socket and tighten down our clamps. Now that's pretty much gonna be the install. We're just gonna tidy up a few things here. Starting with the breather hoses, one on either side. Just gonna slip on like so. And that's just gonna slide on. And then we're gonna tighten that down with a 5.5mm socket. And we're gonna do the same thing for the other side. And finally, we're just gonna plug in our mass airflow sensor and lock it in with the red tab. That is gonna do it for my review and install of the K&N Series 77 high flow performance cold air intake, fitting all 14 to 18 Sierra 1500s with the 5.3 motor. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe for more like this one. For everything GMC, keep it right here at American Trucks.